Hello, everyone, and welcome to this pre-conference session of AAC in the Cloud. We're glad to have you here. Today, we have Kelly and Beth with us, who are going to share a presentation on literacy connection, reading, writing, and AAC. So we will turn things over to them.
So hi, everyone. We are thrilled you are here. And should I go ahead? I'll go ahead and get started. All right, there we go. Slides up and that, there we go. So right, you guys are all here for Literacy Connections, Reading, Writing, and AAC. If you want to hit the next slide, Kelly. And I'm Beth Poss. Just my disclosures, I am a speech language pathologist and I am the director of educational programs for Lesson Picks. You will hear me mention a few things from Lesson Picks during this session, but it's not a Lesson Picks session. I'm a board member for accessible.org and I'm a consultant and inclusion advocate, and I am a co-author, one of 4 co-authors of the book Inclusive Learning 365 EdTech Strategies for Every Day of the Year.
And hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Fonner. I'm really glad to be doing another presentation here at AAC in the Cloud with Beth. We really like this venue and appreciate your time that you've clicked in to listen to us. My background is as a special education teacher. I'm a consultant and assistive technology consultant, and I'm still a teacher online. You're going to be seeing some of my students and a student that Beth and I share, and we really thank their families for allowing us to share those videos with you. Along with, like Beth was talking about disclosures, I'm a leadership member of the Quality Indicators in AT and the Wisconsin AAC Network. I'm a strand advisor at the ATIA conference and one of the co-authors of the Quiet Books. And here's my contact information. And as we get started here and
Kelly,
about, go ahead.
I'm really sorry. I'm going to jump in because it's like the top of the slide is maybe cut off.
I said the same thing.
I thought maybe it was just the first couple, but it's been all of them, and I just want to see if we can address that. Now I'm just seeing you. I'm not seeing the slides.
So it told me that I was stop sharing. Okay, let's give this a.
I know. I noticed the same thing.
Sorry, you guys.
I thought maybe it was just me. So when I was like, well, maybe it's just me.
So open the share tray. Let me see if I should share it. Let me try sharing it in a different way.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I just wanted
How
to.
about now?
Now I can see it all. I do have the little header at the top, but at least I can see the whole slide. So
yeah.
Okay.
That looks good to me. Do you guys want to keep that same intro, or do you want to go back and do it again? It did have a little bit cut off, but I think it wasn't too distracting.
There wasn't. It was just, if we start with this slide, I think it's fine.
Okay. Let me shut my stuff off, and then Kelly, feel free to jump back in. Sorry about that, you guys, but thank you.
So it all looks all right?
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, I think you're good now.
All right. So as we get started, Beth and I were talking about, there is this connection, and literacy is such a hot topic, and AAC communicators and connections to literacy is such a hot topic, and thinking about how are these connected and how are they interrelated. And, as you do a search and as you start looking, there are a lot of people talking about this topic. One of the researchers that we looked at their information was from Lee Road and looked at the comprehensive emergent literacy model. We're also going to be talking about the comprehensive literacy for all from Erickson and Copenhagen. But we also wanted to make sure that you had resources from a variety of places. And I really like how in this model we look at the idea of language and print awareness and phonological awareness and all of the components of those 3 items, but also things that are interrelated like comprehension and grammar and generating text for writing, because we know that there's a strong relationship between reading and writing. And so here's one, good example of that. And, we're talking a lot about communication during this session and throughout the AAC in the Cloud conference, and remembering that language skills really are at the core of literacy skills. So whether we're talking about phonemic awareness, or we're talking about phonics and spelling, or syntax, or talking about vocabulary and comprehension and writing, all of those things involve language and building language skills. So we're going to be sharing with you activities and ideas that really work on the language skills of literacy. Here's another one model that comes from Sharon Skur, and looking at how language, in this case, she lays it out as oral language, and how that impacts. And we know that having information about phonics and having alphabetic principles and syntax and vocabulary and comprehension, all of that influences reading fluency, which kind of seems like the ultimate goal that we're always getting to. Although, as we talk about the work of Erickson and Copenhaver, who talk about that the ultimate goal of teaching children to read is for them to read, of their own choosing, read materials with comprehension.
And just to reiterate a little bit more, just the idea of those connections, right? We've got a definition of what a connection is. It's a relationship in which a person, thing, or idea is linked or associated with something else. And just those strong connections between that language and literacy, core, the project core is referenced right there in that image, about how we're attributing meaning in the work that we are doing in our literacy. We're hoping that our students are able to use whatever language system that we've made available to them beyond their own oral language skills in order to interact and connect with that literacy experience. So those all go hand in hand. They're all tied together. If you're not familiar yet with the Comprehensive Literacy for All Facebook group that the amazing Alyssa Wern runs, you need to pause this recording right now and go get yourself signed up for it, right? She's developed an absolutely brilliant graphic there that really makes very clear the connections between the critical components of literacy instruction for learners with complex needs. That idea that are emergent, are conventional, and then those groups that are in between, that we're all working on all of these different things and that they are very related to each other. And we're going to be talking in the next few slides about these different elements, these different critical components of shared reading and predictable chart writing and phonics and alphabet and word study and phonological awareness, and then that independent reading and independent writing. But this is a great graphic that really kind of ties it all together. And you can participate in the discussions around this by joining that Comprehensive Literacy for All Facebook group. So let's go through some of those components. And this is based on the work of Erickson and Copenhaver from their fabulous book, Comprehensive Literacy for All, that they published in 2020. So let's talk about those pieces of literacy instruction. Shared or dialogic reading, right? Those are the interactions that occur between the adult and the learners as they look at and read a book together. It's more than just reading a book to someone, right? And I think that's why that it's really important. If you think about the term dialogic reading, that helps really cement that idea for you, because it's about the interactions that are happening, the comments that are going back and forth, those opportunities where the adult who's reading pauses and waits for the reaction from the child that's being read to, right? So that's shared and dialogic reading. And we're going to go in a lot more detail into that. Okay, so following from shared reading is quite naturally shared writing. And similarly, it is that interaction with the adults and the students. But in a shared writing activity, the adults are the scribes, right? They're scribing the messages that students dictate or are producing about a topic. And we're going to dive a little bit more into predictable chart writing as an example of shared writing. It's not the only type of shared writing, but it's a good way to talk about it. So alphabet knowledge, right? That is not just knowing alphabet letter names, but it's also knowing the sounds that those letters that we hear when those letters are produced when we're reading them, and the graphic shapes, like what does that letter look like? So that alphabet knowledge is a little bit broader than just knowing your ABCs. Which leads into talking about phonological awareness, and that is the recognition of different units of sound in spoken language. And so that's the, letters, the sounds of letters, the sounds of words, phrases, sentences, all of those sounds that are happening when we look at breaking apart a word. What are we hearing in that? It's also about rhymes and other ways that we are hearing language, right? That language is presenting itself, that written language is presenting itself. Our goal is always to have students be engaged in independent reading, and it's the way that students are interacting with books without assistance from adults. And it's not something where it all looks like the way that we're doing our independent reading, right? It's often going to mirror their understanding of book handling and being read to. So the way that student is going to engage in independent reading is going to often demonstrate where they're at with their reading skills. But it doesn't mean that they can't independently read, even if they are at a very emergent level, right? So that they're looking at books, that they're handling books, or other reading materials. It's not just a paper book, right? And then independent writing, which is structured to give students the maximum control over every aspect of the writing process, right? We are not writing for learners. We're not fixing their spelling. We're not telling them what to write. We can do a little bit more of that. We have a little bit more control when we are scribing for students in that shared writing where we are contributing and helping them with it. But that independent writing is what they are doing and how we are providing them with all these opportunities, tools, and resources in order to produce their own work.
So let's dig into reading an AAC. Beth introduced the idea of shared and dialogic reading and looking at that, how a student and the adult is involved around the dialoguing, around what we're reading, introducing vocabulary, really trying to build that fluency and those language skills. And I just love this picture. One of our colleagues and friends, Gretchen, reading to this group of students. How excited she is. We're also lucky to have another colleague that we work with, Rebecca Eisenberg, who's done a series of videos, and one of them is about shared reading, where she describes shared reading and she has different activities. You're going to hear some video, and then there are words on the screen, and I'm going to read aloud for accessibility purposes the words that are on the screen that aren't vocalized. Shared reading. The interaction that occurs between an adult and student as they read a book together. Ellen Justice, 2005. Why is helping students to shared reading with AAC users? Fewer than 1/3 of students with significant disabilities can read fluently with basic numerical understanding. Erickson House. Here are 5 ways to improve language and literacy. Number 1, label objects in the illustration. Number 2, discuss what is occurring in the book. Number 3, relate to real life scenarios. Number 4, quit referencing pointing keywords as you read. Number 5, pause during reading to help elicit communication. And there's some resources. And as I mentioned, Rebecca has other things that she does. We don't make any money off of sharing this about her, but she does have a lot of more information about literacy and language and connecting those together. So one of the things that is an activity of a shared reading process is this dialogic reading process. And people will have certain strategies. And of course, there can't be enough acronyms in our world, so we have to have some more. And you'll hear people talk about the crowd and the car. The car is explained in shared reading as a process of commenting, asking a question, and then responding by adding a little bit more. And often when we get to that ask a question, people, we adults revert to the familiar, which is often who, what, where, when, and why, which is not really about discussing. It's about answering questions that have a right or wrong answer to them. So the idea of the crowd was developed to talk about the strategies of asking a question that's a completion. So you might leave out a word in a sentence and have somebody complete that sentence. Something that is about recall, what did you think about? Or how did, I'm trying to think of one of the examples I've got is like, how did Dr. Doolittle get to the island? Open-ended questions, so things where it leads to discussion. What did you think about? What would happen if you went on a boat? And then, of course, there are WH questions. We're not leaving those out. But when we're talking with, especially with our AAC communicators, and we're trying to foster their use of core vocabulary and mix that in with custom and fringe, we want to relate things to them as well. And you'll hear these referred to as distancing questions. So distancing are those questions that, you've gone on vacation. Where are places that you have gone? So things that help build background knowledge. And you'll find more information on this and other processes at Jane Farrell's website and some of the nice videos she has. Some other things that you'll hear people talk about in integrating and connecting AAC and literacy are strategies such as descriptive teaching, where we might not have all of the very specific fringe words that might be in a story. For example, one of the students that Beth and I are working with, the word endangered came up in the discussion. And we had to talk about that because she didn't have endangered in her robust vocabulary system. But we wanted to use the words that she had. And so we used things like small and little and other kinds of describing words to talk about that. It can be really helpful if you plan, always nice to plan, ahead of time for these types of words so they don't, surprise you. And so here are some really nice planning strategies. On the left is the AAC word map strategy that Tana Newfield talks about. And if you go to her presentations and go to her website, you'll find that she has these word maps that you can start to fill out. And then Gail Van Tatenhove, the be all end all of integrating literacy into everything that we do, talks about vocabulary trees. And you'll see how she might take a specific word and then really pull it apart into what are the verbs associated and actions associated with that word, the descriptive words associated with it. So what are other words that we can connect to? So try out some of those strategies as you're planning for discussion and shared reading experiences. The other thing is, and that connection with AAC and reading, is empowering our students to be a part of the discussion, not just question responders. And so these are some screenshots from a student of mine that you're going to see in a video a little bit later. And we've really spent this entire school year building her self-determination. She's a 5th grader with complex communication needs. She heavily relies upon low-tech and high-tech systems. And when she's participating in classes, whether it is a teacher that she's with in person or somebody that she's online with, it's really helpful for her to be able to interrupt and say, you know, I have something to say, or ask me a yes or no question, you know, or I want to ask you a yes or no question. She often will use things like, wait a minute, I need a little bit more time, or I want to check and try. So these are very empowering types of messages that you can build and really make sure that you are modeling them as a part of your lessons.
So we've been talking about connecting AAC and language use to literacy. But we also want to talk a little bit around the idea of connecting those literacy experiences across content areas. You know, research shows, and you can see this in the Erickson and Copenhagen book, that you really need like a minimum of 120 minutes a day spent on literacy tasks. But it can be really hard to find that amount of time in your day. And especially if you're talking about individuals with complex needs who may have short attention spans, and you've really got to chop those things up. So we also want to stress throughout this presentation how you can build those skills across the content areas. So for example, we're talking about the importance of building vocabulary across content areas. We can do it in reading through the shared reading of a text. We can do it in writing using that predictable chart writing related to the topic of the text, right? You can see how we're building on that vocabulary. We can do it in social studies where we can talk about the relationship of that topic to the past, to the present, and to the future, where we live or around the world. In science, we can talk about that topic in the physical, environmental, natural world. And in the arts, about how the individual views or interprets that topic. So what might this look like, right, if we were talking about a particular book? So let's say you were reading the fabulous book, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. So that's going to be your shared reading. You're going to be talking about, you're going to be asking questions, maybe it's about, I like to eat that stuff, or, oh, that's gross, whatever it is, it's going to happen in that dialogic shared reading of it. But then in your writing, your predictable chart writing, you might use the sentence stem, it is raining. You can talk about all the different things that it might be raining, or I like to eat, right? Because there's a lot of food in there. So those might be 2 really good sentence stems to do your predictable chart writing based on. And again, getting that vocabulary from your learners. So in social studies, how are we going to connect Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs in social studies? It doesn't really happen, right? I mean, if only ice cream would rain from the sky. But we can talk about where does food come from, right? That's relating it to, like it comes from the grocery store, it comes from farms, it comes from right wherever. Or it might be, what food do you eat in your home? Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the food that flies from the sky is very American. It's very typical, American diet. But we know we've got learners who come from all different cultures. And so you might be able to integrate that, talking about the cultural connections to food. There is a pretty obvious connection with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs to the concept of science, right? To the topic of science. We could be talking about weather, but we could be talking about real weather situations. And then in the arts, it's really, how is somebody interpreting that? So maybe they're going to create a collage of food that you cut out from, grocery store flyers, right? To fall from the sky. Or maybe in your music session, you're going to create music that sounds like weather, right? Like drumming and percussion and all sorts of different instruments. So you all throughout this, you're having those same conversations around food, around weather, around the vocabulary that originated with this book, but you're connecting it across all of those different content areas. So switching gears just a little bit, and we're still talking about making these connections, but we went from shared reading, and now we're going to talk about enhanced and embedded alphabet instruction. And that's all tied into that phonics work, right? And it involves instruction embedded, involves instruction in those sound symbol relationships that's built into authentic reading experiences. That you're reading for the pleasure of reading or to learn information about something, as opposed to specifically working on that explicit reading instruction of that phonics work. So when we're talking about that enhanced and embedded alphabet instruction. And so, what might that look like? Letter of the day is a really fabulous way to embed and enhance that literacy instruction, that phonics instruction across a day. And I'm saying letter of the day, I'm not saying letter of the week. You can read in the Erickson Copenhaver book, and I'm going to show you another resource, why we do letter of the day and not letter of the week. But what might that look like, right? So it might look like alphabet books, finding the letter of the day in texts across the curriculum, letter scavenger hunts, and then in this image here, it's games that focus on the letter of the day. So you can take that Zingo game and adapt it so that it's all, if your letter of the day is B, that all of the tiles are going to be have that letter B in there in that word. And so this is actually an activity in Lesson Picks where you can make custom Zingo game tiles and other custom resources for different kind of commercially available games. Those alphabet books, those letter books, connecting it to, that enjoyable instruction. So maybe you've been reading, for example, the book, you might be reading the book Black Beauty, or you might be reading another book. You might be, your shared reading might be around animals of some sort, right? Maybe your sciences, but then you could read H is for horse, right? Or our letter J book. And so these are books that have been created by someone. One of them was created by me, the other one wasn't. And those are available on Lesson Picks. You can make your own. There's lots and lots of other places that you can get custom books that are created around a particular letter. You can also go on to Tar Heel Reader, and both Jane Farrell and Caroline Musselwhite have made a lot of really fun books around a particular letter. So the book R is really important, that how it's really important to pirates. Oh, and now I can't think of the what it is, but there's some funny puns in there. There's some really funny things in there around why, what happens if you don't have the letter R in a particular word. Or I love on Epic, there's a whole series called Discover the Alphabet, and every single book in that series is focused on one particular letter. What I really like about this series is that it's really clean. Like you see that white, crisp, clean, there's not a lot of distractions on the page. And because it's using primarily photographs, it's very age respectful, even for older students. And as you go through the book, it's not just going to show things that start with the letter of the day, but where that letter of the day might be within a word also. So it goes beyond just words that start with a particular letter. So that's from Epic. We mentioned print referencing a couple of times. This is also another great way that you can enhance and embed that alphabet and that phonics instruction. And you can use those same strategies of follow the car or crowd in the car. So let's say we were looking and doing a shared reading of this book, which happens to be a digital book on planets, right? And so it can be things like, where on this page should I start reading? That's a concept of print thing, right? Or Pluto starts, as we're reading it, Pluto starts with the letter P. Who in our class has a name that starts with the letter P? Do you see another letter P on the page there, right, in the word planet? Or not and now sound alike. They both start with the same sound, right? So embedding that into the reading that you're doing. So when you're thinking about that shared reading and the questions that you're asking, it doesn't always have to be about the content or the topic of the book. It can be about the text that they are seeing. Scavenger hunts. So this is another fabulous tip from Caroline Musselwhite. The idea of using a scavenger hunt to focus on literacy. And what she talks about is using social scripts to help create conversations. The nice thing about this is it can be used with a simple communication device like a sequenced message device, or you could have it set up on a robust system. But a social script has some basic things that are a part of it: an attention getter, a conversation starter, conversation maintainers, and a closing. And if we think about doing this around a scavenger hunt for a letter that somebody's looking for, somebody could, hit their switch and say, "Excuse me," and then hopefully you've got adults that are going to be willing and trained communication partners, and they're going to say, "Sure, what can I help you with?" And then the starter is going to be hit that switch. "I'm making a letter book for kindergarten class." And oh, great. Well, what do you need? Then hit that switch. "My letter is L. Could you find something that starts with L? I need a picture of it, please." Right? So go and get a picture of something, and then pop, hit that switch again. "Thanks so much. I'll show you the book when it's done. Catch you later." And that's just an example of a script. But you can see how you can do this with really all levels of communicators. And all different types of communication needs. So a couple of really great resources for embedded and enhanced alphabet instruction. The first one is No More Teaching a Letter a Week by McKay and Teal. This really goes in depth into the reason that we do a letter a day and not a letter a week, but it also gives you lots and lots of ideas of embedding that letter of the day across the curriculum. And it's a gen ed focused book, right? So it's going to kind of be focused on that kindergarten level. But there's really great resources in there. And it's like this thin. It's super easy. It's a fast read. It's totally a beach read. And then there's the ABCs of Alphabet Knowledge and Phonological Awareness. That is by Caroline Musselwhite, Deanna Wagner, and Gretchen Hanser. It's available on TPT. So if you go to Caroline Musselwhite's TPT page, you can find it there. And it's got just filled with tons and tons of resources on how to embed alphabet and phonological awareness instruction across your day.
So that starts to build us up to a more systematic phonic instruction. And we look at systematic phonic instruction as being the method of teaching students how to connect those graphemes or letters with the phonemes, the sounds, and being really clear and well thought out with us having a scope and sequence of it. It isn't just about making up, kind of making it up as you go. And you'll see a clip here on the side from one of the videos from Assistiveware that has some nice training videos on their company website and some information on their blog. So I wanted to give you an example from a video example of students that we work with. So this is one of my students that I work with that was an upper elementary student that hadn't been exposed a lot to the components of literacy. And so we're taking our systematic process from the work of Patricia Cunningham and following the systematic sequential phonics they use. This is a long clip, so I'm just going to show you components of it, how we get started. It's you're seeing the screen that I share with her, so I'll tell you a little bit about it before we go to it. And as it gets started here, there'll be some information. I'm not very, I don't have a lot of sound other than us talking in it. And so this is Creedy. She uses an eye gaze system with partner assisted scanning on a pod book.
New.
And she also has an electronic system. Would you like to do a new writing? Or something new with letters? And I'm just going to give it a little pause there, just so I can, kind of shifting images here, just so I can lay out the screen for you so you know what you're looking at. This is a student that I obviously work with online, and I've been working with her for a number of school years now, 2 or 3. Well, we're in our 3rd school year. So my screens are on the right. So that's my Zoom screen in the upper right. The lower right is the book it's her communication book that I have here at my desk that I model from underneath a document camera. On the left is from her home. And so it's at her desk in her home. And you see her there. She, in this particular video, she's with her mom. And on the upper, you see kind of so that we can be talking face to face. On the lower left, you can see a kind of side shot of all the things that are going on that include her high-tech AAC system. Her mother has in her hand the low-tech AAC system. And then they have some other materials around that they'll use. So it's kind of orient you to the screen.
First choice. Okay. Second choice.
And the choices right now are whether she's reading or writing.
Mrs. Kelly, she's ready. Listen. New letters.
New letters. All right. So you
Also looked at check and try, new letters, touched it and said, I'm taking a guess.
Okay. And someday she's using her iPad. Something new with letters. Someday she's using IGNSW.
That sounds right.
All right. Letter
New.
Yes, new one. There. She doesn't like to go back and repeat stuff, so new is a big thing. What letter? I'm going to go to my alphabet. Now you're going to see a screenshot from her custom alphabet. IJKLMN. This is her alternative pencil. And one of our letters, one of our vowels is I. All right. One of our vowels is letter I. And she's got a magnetic board as well as her electronic alphabet. Share this. See her mom showing you the board. I. So those are the manipulatives that we're going to be working with. I'm going to letter I. And I made the letter I in pink because your letter I is in pink. And I use Jamboard for this particular activity. I'm going to scoot us forward here so you can.
There you go.
All right. What letter goes there? Is I. And we've already talked about the letters. All right. So we're going to add that word to our list. We have the word is. You put them in your word list. There's the word is. I-S. Is. Okay, let's make the next word. I'm going to get rid of this letter. I'm going to keep the I, remove the S, and take the N. And now, so we had mentioned that part of this process is being very systematic. It's not about having kids guess. It's not about making silly words. It's really about keeping those words within real words, words that we're working on the sounds and how sounds go together, how removing one sound and replacing it with another, and really teaching them that whole process. But part of the tricky pieces with kids that are using alternative pencils and using AAC systems is that figuring out of what's being said, what's being done, how are they indicating the manipulatives that some children can pick up and move, but other children are going to have to be directing. So she needs to be able to, in her communication system, move into a directing mode and then back into the speaking aloud, whatever the activity is that we're working on. And so it really does become an enjoyable activity. It becomes very repetitious. So once you have some of those processes in place, then you know that you're going to be able to using them over and over again. And I know that Beth does this activity with other students, so she's going to take you on an expansion of that.
So what I want to show you now is another tool that you can use to explore how you can put letters together to form words based on that systematic phonics instruction, where you're working very specifically on particular letters, particular sounds. This is a screenshot from the UFLI, which is University of Florida Literacy, and I am blanking on what the I is, I think instruction or initiative. It's one of those two. But it is their virtual blending board. So this was something I think that they developed during the pandemic, but it can still be used whether you're doing it virtually or whether you're doing it in person on an interactive whiteboard. It's a really, really fabulous tool. With this, I want you guys to notice how there's a set of letters that's like a light blue, it's kind of like a blue, right? That's going to be the first letter in a word. There's a set of letters that are yellow. Those are the vowels in this particular situation. It wouldn't have to necessarily be vowels. That's going to be the second letter in a word. And then I've got those like green letters in there, and those are going to be the third. You'll even see the pink at the end, where if I wanted to introduce words with that silent E. So it's really about understanding the different components and the way that letters come together to form a word. I can also, with this, I can tailor it. Like this has got a lot of letters in it. You'll notice it doesn't have all, it's not necessarily all, but this one actually might be all the letters of the alphabet. I don't have to have all the letters of the alphabet in it though, right? I can decide I only want 5 letters at the beginning, right? 1 vowel that's the choice for the middle, and whatever letters, have 5 letters at the end. And the letters can be the same or different that are your beginning and your ending letters. But what it really helps emphasize is what is the sound? So if we're going to spell the word cat, cat, what is the sound that you are hearing for the word cat? Now, when you click on these letters, or the individual clicks on these letters, there's no sound. It doesn't say the letter. This is not doing that work for the student. It is just a way of controlling the resources that you have at hand and making it really, really obvious. What we're talking about is the first sound in the word, the middle sound in the word, that vowel, the last sound in the word. And again, I could make this much more complex. We could have digraphs. We can get into much longer words, but it's a way of putting it together. And as you create, you're going to see those letters come up along the side also. So the words that are formed. So again, that's can be part of that systematic. You're going to follow a systematic plan of introducing sounds and letters in a particular manner. And then the UFLI site has lesson plans that go along with this. So if you're not sure like where to start with that systematic phonics instruction, don't worry. UFLI is going to give you those lesson plans along with the tools for it. So let's talk a little bit about connecting those dots again with around that embedded phonics, the core vocabulary. So this is a book that is from Unite for Literacy, so a totally free website with simple picture books. And if we were reading this book for pleasure, for whatever reason, because remember when we're talking about embedded, we're doing the reading in order to enjoy ourselves, to learn about something. But as we're reading this, if we've just finished the lesson like that Kelly did with Creedy, where they made the word in, we could find in this particular book the word in and be like, as we're reading it, what do you see up in a tree? Oh, the word in is in there. We just practiced making in on our Jamboard. We just practiced making in with our magnetic letters. Can we find the word in this book? I see it, I, N, in, right? And as it would happen, a word like in is also a great core vocabulary word, right? So we could really be getting that with our language as well. Go ahead and hit the next slide. Just another example of another type of book that you could do the same thing with, right? This is from Readtopia Go, which is the new early childhood curriculum from the folks at Building Wings. So one of their units of study is families. And so same thing, we've got the word in. That last book, in, was actually on every single page. In this book, it's on multiple pages, but not in every single. But the same thing, we could be finding that word in, or finding other words that we might have encountered, letters that we might have encountered. And if we look for those, so often those smaller words also happen to be core vocabulary, we can pull that in. There you go. And let's connect this further across the content area, right? So I can do a cooking activity. That's going to be a science-based activity, right? When we cook, it's science. And so a cooking activity is great for focusing on that word in. But in this one, we've got some other words too. It might be is. I think it's really small print on there and I can't see it. But I believe that the word is in that recipe a couple of times also, right? So we could look for in, we could look for is. And then there's some foils because it says stir it up. I can read that. It says stir it up there. So it's like, oh, you know, I see you saw that I in there. I see you saw that it was 2 letters, but that word is it. Do you see that letter T that's at the end of it? It's it. Another activity that's part of the Retopia Go curriculum, and this would be more of a social studies focused lesson, the people in our family. And again, the people in our family, you know, there is a brother in my family, there is a sister in my family, and having those opportunities for repetition with variety across all of these different content areas.
I think you have to clap every time we hear in.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good one. That would be a very Caroline Musselwhite strategy.
Right. Beth had mentioned earlier on when we were going through all of the strategies about independent reading and the importance of leading and giving opportunities for independent reading. And so part of independent reading in the classroom is having a wide, or in a home, is having a well-organized collection of books. That books aren't just, I think sometimes people get too obsessed with ordering books by the level of reading, but also seeing them organized by interest area and topic and personal choices and ways that we can influence each other in what we read. So you see some examples of, what are some of the ideas and activities that we do to support students making their own choices? Well, we can do book talks where kids share what they found out, not necessarily a book report, but what are some of the things that really you liked about this book that might influence others? You might, as the teacher or a support person in that classroom, do mini lessons around how you make choices of books. Really support independent reading time. You know, there are schools that have entire programs of drop everything and read. And even, the janitorial staff are reading and everybody is reading, for 5 to 10 minutes every school day to really show that that's important. And then the other thing is conferencing or conferring with individual students and talking to them about it. And there are some other great ideas on the whole independent reading process in your classroom that you can find at the Fontes and Pinnell What is Independent Reading website. And I like that Beth made this image in lesson picks. That could be something that it could be supplemental to robust vocabulary systems. It could be an introduction to AAC where kids have that vocabulary for that in supporting that independent choice. The other important thing, or one other important thing in independent reading, is really getting children to connect to the book. And I'm saying children, but we're doing this with young adults. We're doing this with teenagers. How connected are they to the materials? We want to think about when the Harry Potter books, first came out and everybody was reading and everybody was passing them on and reading them to other people that might have been able to read at that level. We want to keep that going. And as new reading series and new stories and new characters come out, that people can recognize and really connect the text to themselves, and how you feel about it, or an action or activity, something like maybe you were in the same place. So there are some, really nice examples about it. Now, when we talk about the books that are available during independent reading, we're not talking about books that are at a student's instructional level, where you're trying to teach them more about reading and decoding unfamiliar words. You're really looking at giving them selection of books in which they have 95 to 100% decoding accuracy with. These are the books that they read and reread, and they know them inside out without even looking at the page. But you really want to be building fluency. You want to be building confidence in reading. I love these two pictures are from a classroom that I got to visit in Portage la Prairie, Canada. So shout out to our northern friends. And this is from a kindergarten grade 1 mixed abilities classroom. And so it was a gen ed classroom that had, I was there to consult on a kid who had complex communication needs. And I love what this teacher did at the beginning of the school year. As they organized and assorted the books, she involved the kids in that process. So whether they were doing magazines or they were doing books that, you know, they had found or books that were donated to the school, they started organizing them in different ways. And in the upper right-hand corner is a picture of one of her book bins, and I can't even read all of these because the kids labeled them. So there's like one that's all about bears, you know, and another one, oh, I wish I could, mothers, I don't know, dinosaurs. And so it's kids using their inventive spelling to label it. And then she has another section in the room where books are that alphabet process that Beth was talking about, you know, books that really emphasize certain letters and certain sounds. And so kids could go and pick from those bins. Reading and rereading is a big part. So whether you are introducing the book during a guided reading activity and then kids have been exposed to it, then that puts it into the shared reading experience. I like it too when we're doing things electronically. Beth did a screenshot from Tar Heel Reader. In Tar Heel Reader, you can mark favorite books and kids can create their own bookshelf. I've been doing that with some older kids in the program Clusive from CAST, where you can download electronic books and you can sort them and you can have them in different organizational strategies. It's really important to get access to books for independent reading and all different kinds of books, electronic books, books that you go and get in the library. And when we talk about the idea of access, it isn't just that are they there, but can your kids go and get them? Can your students go and get them? Are you set up for accessible page turning? Are there options for audio books? Because learning to read and print process to read and learning to listen to read, you know, are just as important processes in independent reading. And so working with your local libraries, working with your school library to make sure that you have accessible books in all different media and all different representations is really important.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit and connect writing and AAC. So again, we're still connecting those dots, but now instead of me being writing on the computer, I have become a pencil as my Bitmoji. So we talked about shared writing a little bit already, right? That it's that process of writing together, right? And it really is an opportunity for the adults to model how to write a particular type of text, right? And I want to be really clear. When we talk about shared writing, it is not, if you look back at one of the slides, the slide about predictable chart writing, about the emergent, the slide from Alyssa Warren, and it puts predictable chart writing as which is a shared writing activity for emergent writers. And emergent readers. However, I think you can use shared writing at all different levels of literacy, all the way up to really competent writers, because it's this opportunity for writers, for adults and children to be writing together and structure different types of literacy, which makes it great for these mixed ability classes, because you can set increased expectations and of different types of output from some students, and know that you can tailor it to exactly what another student might need that might have more limited vocabulary or ability to add to that writing piece, right? So it usually involves a teacher who's writing on something that everybody can see it. So that's a really important part of shared writing, right? Whether it's a chart paper, whether it's a whiteboard, whatever it is. And there's lots of participation from everybody. And there's a nice link there about shared writing from twinkle.com.
And this picture is from the same classroom where the book bins were. And at this point, they have a couple of classrooms that they mix kids together. This teacher is a gen ed elementary teacher who has in front of her, and you see kids participating in ideas that they're shouting out. And these are kids that are kindergarten, first and second grade. She is wearing a pod book. It's really hard to see because she's leaned over, but she's got a shared pod book. So she has one of the ones that a modeling book. There's only one child in her classroom that uses pod, but she is using that and modeling that for everybody in the room.
So some benefits of shared writing is that it can really help reluctant writers, and it gives students who maybe struggle. So writers that feel like I can't be a writer, that's their perception, or that it's challenging, or that they've always been told what they could write, or worse, their writing has been copying, right? We see that all too often with so many of our kids with complex needs, that the writing is simply copying what somebody else has put, right? This is a way for them to genuinely participate and write. And it can be an inspiration for a starting point. It's much more than just a technique for giving your class a head start, right? It allows those teachers to be able to provide a solid model for writing, and you do a commentary of what you're doing as the adult. And we'll give an example of that in just a minute. So components of shared writing, right? You're going to, if you were writing a story, for example, as opposed to an informational piece, right? You're going to write the features of it, right? You're going to have a title to it. You're going to start your model. And if we're going to be writing this, it's going to be, so it says in there, if I were a dog, I would be very messy, right? So the adult that's writing that, so maybe the question is, if I were, and what should we be? What animal should we be, right? But as that teacher is writing for the students there, it would be if that word, I hear that sound, if I hear that F in it. And if I were a dog, I would be very messy. Oh, that's the end of my sentence. I need to have a period there, right? Then you can go in and add additional elements to it, right? Add adjectives, add plot elements, have feature on particular literacy elements that you might be looking for. So whether it's like exciting verbs or descriptive adjectives or having a variety of nouns, whatever it might be, those are all the components that you're going to do collaboratively with the students getting their input from. So predictable chart writing is a very highly structured writing strategy where you generally start with a sentence stem, and it's something that happens across multiple days. So it can be writing across an entire week. And when you get started, the day one, you're writing the chart, right? That's where the chart of predictable chart writing. And generally, you start with a stem. So like this one here, it's I like to eat. And every student is going to be given the same stem and given an opportunity to give their genuine response to it. So, it might be candy, it might be that, and then you say, who wrote it, right? Johnny wrote it. Think about the opportunities to direct students to some fringe vocabulary that they might be working on. So if we're talking about that stem, I like to eat, that'd be really easy to direct them to that fringe vocabulary on food. right? So the second day is you're rereading that sentence. You're emphasizing that I like to eat, that stem, and then everybody's contributions to it. You might focus more on some of the words in that stem. It might be an opportunity, especially in that stem, if there's some of that core vocabulary, to really focus on it, give those students an opportunity to read using their augmentative communication system, that sentence stem, because now they've had an opportunity to hear it a lot. On day 3, you cut up the sentence, right? And it can be physically cutting up with scissors, but it can also be, there's other ways, right? I do this on with a Jamboard. And so the way that we cut up the sentence is by having each of the words. So we type out the words initially, but then we put each of the words on the little Post-it squares like Kelly demonstrated in that video, because we're not there to physically cut it up. But there's lots of ways that you can cut that sentence up. What cutting the sentence up helps the student understand is that each of those things that they're cutting apart are words, and that those words are made up of letters. They're not cutting up the individual letters, but that I is a separate word from like is a separate word from to is a separate word from candy. So it's reinforcing those important literacy elements. Day 4, it's be the sentence, right? So kids are coming up with, larger size of those same words that they cut up, right? But it's going to be like on an individual piece of paper or on cardstock or whatever it is. And they're rearranging that sentence. And you can have kids come up and figure out, well, where should they be in that sentence? Who's the next person that's got the word that should come after this? So that they're really seeing how those words come back together to form a sentence. Day 5, you're making the book. And that's where you're going to put it all back together. You could make it multimedia at that point if you wanted to, like putting it into, something digital so that students can ask for access purposes, or creating simply a book that then becomes a part of that classroom library, like those boxes that Kelly showed you on that. One of the things that I do want to say about predictable chart writing, it seems like it's really simple right there, right? It seems like I like to eat candy. And we're talking about lower vocabulary, simple sentences, all of that. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? It could be, so if you've got somebody who's got the ability to generate more language, complex language, it could be, I like to eat salty popcorn with cheese on it, right? So you can expand it and make it much more than that simple one-word response. So you can tailor it to the learners that you have in your classroom, right? Everybody gets to participate. They're all participating at that same level. They all own a part of that book, but you can set those, if you know somebody's has that ability to add more, you can set those expectations for them. So independent writing is that time when students accomplish their own writing, right? They're using the knowledge that they've built, that you've built on through that previous instruction, and they are writing however they are able to, right? So it might be with alternative pencils. It might be with different types of writing implements, so like crayons and markers and pencils. It might be with magnetic letters, like so having different ways. If you've been practicing with magnetic letters and you're making words lessons, having magnetic letters available for those students to do independent writing is a great way to carry over something that's familiar to them to that next step. So this is a great quote that I love from Erickson and Copenhagen, the Erickson and Copenhagen book. Adults must be vigilant kid watchers who observe everything, refrain from correcting or criticizing, and always encourage students to write more. So what that means is, as you are seeing your student do that independent writing, you are not going to come up to them and say you spelled that word wrong. Or let's say their level of independent writing is putting random magnetic letters together on a cookie sheet, or that they are hitting letters on a keyboard. You're observing it. Now you might comment and go, oh, I see the letter T in there. We were talking about we were talking about, now I can't think, we were talking about turkeys. I wonder, T is for turkey, but you're not going to assume that for that student, it's their work, right? And you're not going to be then like, oh, that is a T. And they say, yes, that's a T for turkey. Oh, well, the way you spell turkey is Turkey. Can you find those letters? That's not independent writing, right? It's whatever they are doing. And then saying, hey, can you do more? I really like what you wrote. Can you do more? So it's really, they own that.
And I think that there's a misunderstanding that people think that you have to do something like predictable chart and work on that language stuff before you do independent. And we're trying to show you that these are activities that are happening simultaneously, because we can't just work on the language of it without actually getting to the printed text of writing.
And then one thing that adults can do, that those teachers can do, is and connect things across that curriculum that you're writing, right? Is you can model for your learners what writing looks like by creating a mentor text. You're writing that mentor text that's connected. So we're going to go back to my topic of, we've been reading Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, right? And I can think aloud for my students what that process is, right? Of how do I go through the writing process as that adult? Oh, we've been reading Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and it's a really funny book. I can write a book like that, right? I can write about food falling on me, and then thinking, especially if we've done some predictable chart writing where we wrote, I like to eat. So I could say, oh, I like ice cream, right? Ooh, it would be funny if ice cream landed on my head. So how am I going to write about that? I will write, ice cream fell on me. Ice cream. I hear the letter ice cream. Now, I'm not going to try to sound out every single letter, as that would be tedious, right? But I'm going to pick opportunities where I'm going to emphasize, and that might be some of that embedded literacy instruction. Maybe we worked on a letter of the day. Oh, I can hear that letter of the day in what I wrote. Or maybe we've done our systematic sequential phonics, and I've been working on a particular vowel or a vowel and consonant combination. It's a great way, right? I'm going to model those conventions or other elements of the writing, right? I can end a sentence. Should I end this sentence? I need to end a sentence with a punctuation. Could be a period. Ice cream fell on me. Or it could be an exclamation point. Ice cream fell on me, right? So emphasizing what that is. Then once you've got that all finished, you can go back. It doesn't have to be the same day. You can go back and model the editing process. Like, oh, this is what I wrote. Oh, I could add more details to my story. Chocolate ice cream fell on me. And so again, you're modeling it. In independent writing, we want students to pick their own topics. They don't all in independent writing write about food falling on their head. That might be what you do in your predictable chart writing and in your shared writing. And it might be what you're modeling, but they get to pick their own text. But those mentor texts that you're creating can be a way to reiterate vocabulary that you've been working on and connect those concepts that they are seeing in the curriculum to the writing. You're just modeling it, though. They don't have to do what you did.
Yeah, it's a great way to bring in those things like word of the week, right? So if people are working on core vocabulary and core vocabulary strategies. Some other practices, and Beth is giving you some really great examples of them, are, we teach the strategies and as we generate and how to generate writing ideas. David Copenhaver has an activity that you do where we do lists of fives. Well, who are your 5 favorite baseball players? What are your 5 favorite foods? What are your 5 favorite things to do outside? So you end up doing a whole writing activity just in these lists of favorite things, so that when you get to independent writing time and somebody says, well, what are you going to write about? It isn't all about, oh, I don't know. It's about, well, pick something from your 5 favorites. We need to make sure that we anchor, if we're doing chart writing, that we're really anchoring students in one way or another to concepts and words and the process. You might decide to figure out how you're going to give them access to a variety of tools. We want to look at making sure that you have dedicated writing time, and it doesn't have to be 45 minutes. A lot of people, they go, oh, we're going to write, like people dread it, but it can be that 10 minutes that everybody's picking a topic and writing, and that can either continue for some, or other kids might go into another activity. There are some screenshots here from one of my students that, one of the things that really motivates her is what she's reading. And so she's reading it. If we can find, a very dynamic reader online, which many of us know some of those sites, that, somebody's reading the book to them, it gives them some ideas about what they can write about. And then remember that writing doesn't have to all be about writing narrative. You can write poems, you can write letters, you can write email, so figure out that audience, who might they be writing to? There is a process in integrating writing for emergent writers and into conventional writers called First Author. It's a curriculum developed by Dr. Janet Sturm, and as Beth had mentioned, Building Wings before, they have that as one of their products. But two things happen, because I want to get us in line with that connection of AAC and the alphabet in the writing process. Is that for the students that I work with, we write with both their words in their AAC system, and we write with their alphabet in their AAC system. And we might do them both in the same activity. And so in the First Author line of activities, there are lessons that you do. Well, during those lessons, kids are going to be using their AAC system, low tech or high tech, to participate. We negotiate, what topic we're going to do in our group writing. And then they might use their letters as we do the group writing, and everybody contributes, because if we want somebody to be able to write with the alphabet, they need to write with the alphabet. It can't just all be these whole word types of activities. And I get a little over enthusiastic about it, because the process of predictable chart has a very big day in the sun right now. And sadly, to me, as I do searches on Google AAC and writing, everything that I find, and I mean everything that I find, is on the shared writing activity of predictable chart. You don't see people talking about independent writing. And so we really want to make sure that you are merging these together with your consumers. So during that writing time, they will use their communication device to talk about their topic. My students will create word banks that what are the words that they want to make sure they include, and also for getting attention and getting assistance. But they're using their letters to write, and they're also using their word prediction. So we're really manipulating the things that they were working with during that systematic phonic process. And then one of the ultimate goals of writing is sharing, and sharing what you've written. So activities such as author's chair, where students use their whole words to tell everybody, this is what I wrote about. They can answer questions. They can ask questions of somebody else that's in author's chair, or if we do things like All About Me. And then also, if they're talking about something that they wrote that was all letters, they can use their alphabet to read those letters aloud. So I just wanted to give you two examples of this in action. So the first one here is from a young adult who's doing email, and we talk about cohesion with email, but she uses her whole words, and she uses, you'll see here, that she uses touch chat with word power. And during activities that are things like writing email and writing poems, writing her biography, she's using her whole words to write. I have two things that we can do today, my friend. Let's see. Which would you like to do?
Do you want to write or do you want to read?
Write. Want to write? Okay. Pick a topic and write with your alphabet, or use words and write an email.
Letters or email? Which one?
we are writing email. Who do you want to write an email to? Question. So you see that writing opportunities also give you opportunities to model, to expand, to recast things that they've said. This particular writing frame is one that was developed and shared with us from Kate Ahern and her Ahern Academy, where you give them different categories in email like greetings, tell about your life, answer a question, ask a question, and then have a departure. I'm going to jump up a little bit where she gets a little bit more enthusiastic about what she's writing. Funny.
Am funny.
You are funny. Anything else? And oh, keep going.
I am funny.
You are funny. I am funny. What about you?
Tara. I am funny, Tara.
I am funny, Tara. She had
What do
chosen
you
to
do
write to
that's
her
so
mother,
funny?
who was gone on a business trip.
Do you like to laugh? Do you like to tell jokes? Yes. You like to smile? I am funny, Tara. Yeah. You could say, I like
I
to. What's your idea?
like new. Yes. Funny. Yes.
And as Beth said, it's not my
Tara.
job to put all of these
Like
words
new,
in the
yes,
right order
funny, yes,
or
Tara.
to spell them
Tell me
all, but
more.
it's to get her to,
I like funny, Tara.
it's to
like
get her
funny,
to elicit
Tara.
ideas. And we're using whole words in that type of writing. But we also do writing in independent writing where students are using their alphabet, whether it's an alternative pencil through partner assisted scanning, like what you're going to see here on the right with Mason, or whether it is a keyboard that they're typing straight into that keyboard. So here's just an example of that.
Still. Yes, one of those. Hurry up.
Oh, Mason, I don't know. You're building a good one. Something's wrong. Uncomfortable. Food and drink.
Hurry up. Is that what you're saying? Hurry up? Are you saying hurry up?
Should we be hurried up so you can get some food?
Yeah, 51A.
There you go. So we start out talking, what do you want to write about? And Mason picks his topic amongst all the other things he's got to discuss with us. And then we go to the alphabet. Oh, there, Mommy found your letters.
There we go. Look, there's your letters.
And then what Miss Kelly's going to do is switch over to something where I'm going to type all the letters that you pick.
Ooh.
Oh.
Oh, look here, Maves. Look what Kelly's got.
So this is just a PowerPoint slide deck. Gives us a place to put letters
Yes,
and
you
images.
are. Yes. We're going to look at our letters.
Are we gonna spell something?
You're going to write like we did before? All
All
right.
let's get up to some writing.
ABC.
Now I know that the little images in Zoom, the way it does it makes it very small. Mason has Pitt-Hopkins syndrome. He's very mobile. So the movements that you see are not necessarily yes and no movements with his body. He selects his alphabet by using his voice. So his mother will auditorily scan through it. He also has a cortical vision impairment. And when he hears the letter that he wants, he will say, ah, or he will tap the book.
CDE, one of those. No. FGHIJ, one of those. KLMNO, one of those. PQRST, one of those. Oh, was that a yes? Yes. Okay, great. You chose PQRST. All right, ready? P. Yes. P, our first letter.
Right.
So he says it and we write it. And that's the way the process goes for him with his alternative pencil. So we really want to make sure that we emphasize to you that for your AAC communicators, that they get into independent writing. So you have an example here from that template that we use with Tara doing email. On the right, my colleague Kristen Gray uses Typeform. She has a student who does a survey of us every week. And this is how he really got started with writing. Now he sends general emails that have pictures of what he's doing. But we went through about 2 years of him emailing us surveys where he would work out a survey question. He would have pictures that we all voted on. And then the next week he would report back on what it was that most people voted on and then ask us a new question. And it was a way just to create a community of writers around him. So as we start coming towards the end here of our presentation, we want you to be thinking about, we want our AAC communicators to be connected to community. And writing and literacy are big topics of that. Being able to write for pleasure and write in a very constructive way. I had mentioned author's chair. Author's chair is a common general ed practice where educators create community of writers within their room. And it's not about sharing so that people can be critical, but so that other people can hear what you're thinking about, and then they can give you ideas and suggestions. I had a 10th, 11th grade resource teacher that was using author's chair, and it started out where she was doing it once a week, but she got so much enthusiasm from her 10th and 11th graders, all who had, were struggling readers and writers that were writing maybe a sentence, 2 sentences, for some kids. But because their classmates would comment and say, somebody wrote, when I was in their classroom, somebody wrote, "I like cell phones." And somebody else said, "Well, where'd you get a cell phone?" Is it your mom's cell phone? Like, they had all kinds of questions for them. What color is that cell phone? What kind of case do you have in the cell phone? And the parapros were taking notes as people were writing. So then the next day they had the opportunity to write again. They could go back to their original topic and edit it and expand it by looking at the notes that people had given them, or they could choose a whole nother activity. So things like pair shares, where kids share their activity, they're writing together in an activity, being able to do things like all about me's, where you share images and text to go along with those. We want to make sure that writing happens not just in isolation and not just on one-on-one with your adult caregiver, but that it happens in true pairs of learners and small groups of learners and large groups of learners. And also, if you don't have people around you, what I'm doing with my community of students is having a group online, and you'll see other people online as well. People share their personal stories. This is a great way to work with vocabulary and custom vocabulary and teaching kids about audience. And you see some steps here in the 7 steps to create a powerful story. And a nice example from a pic collage example there on the right from Assistiveware with somebody using the keyboard from Kidogo that one of my students uses that with the color coding and word prediction built into it. But it really is about sharing. And so as we end our time in sharing with you and wrapping this up, we want to, go back to that idea of the models that we started with and kind of connect full circle to this. And Jane Farrell's taking these components of comprehensive literacy and looked at those in those components of activities that you saw from Melissa Wern's graphic. And when we're looking at our readers and writers who are in emergent stages, the activities that we've mentioned that really work well with them. And then our students who are more moved into that conventional reader and writing, and the ways that we still are working with explicit teaching and literacy activities and with writing and emphasizing. And I want to give Beth a chance here to add anything else that she would like to say as we are wrapping up.
And I just want to say, yeah, when you see those two models of the emergent to the conventional, realize that there are some students that are somewhere in between. And so you can have some fluidity, right? Again, like that shared writing can be a part of what you do with conventional readers or writers. And it might be a way that you bridge those emergent, transitional, and conventional readers and writers. So there's things that can kind of be a little bit fluid with that as well. That self-selected reading is a part of what emergent readers need to do as well. So think about it not as you only do this with emergent and you only do this with conventional, but that there can be a lot of fluidity and connection between those.
We talked about Project Core there in the beginning, and please know that's a really great resource to go to get information, and the whole, one of the things that connects academics that we've talked about, daily activities, therapies, and all the specials is communication. That making sure that you have ways in which students can communicate throughout all of these activities of the day. It isn't just get your communication device out at morning meeting and snack, but how do I communicate through literacy activities and math and social studies and history and writing, all of those pieces. I found this graphic as I was searching things on the U.S. Department of Education. And even though it specifically speaks to English language learners, I think that there are connected principles between English language learners and augmentative communication language learners. And I really love the way it pulled together this idea of when do we do things, and then the how, that we look at providing specific reading interventions. We're teaching vocabulary. We're developing their vocabulary within academics. We're doing peer learning. All of these things are things that we've been talking about. And what encircles all of this, kind of those supporting conditions, are staff collaboration, finding some planning time in all the different ways that we find planning time, attending professional development like you are here at AAC in the cloud, and all of the wonderful resources that you get from this conference opportunity, that we look at working with reading materials and being systematic and sequential with what we're doing, and that we monitor the progress that's happening. So with that,
thank you guys for hanging with us and for learning with us. We appreciate it. So feel free to reach out. My contact information is back on the first slide, so you can always scroll back to find it as well.
And we want to thank AAC in the cloud for their support and doing these conferences every year online.
Oh, we love to have you guys. We're always excited to pull you in and tap into your experience and insights and all that you have to offer the AAC community. So thank you very much, Kelly and Beth, for taking time to be with us today to share so much information about reading and literacy and language learning, and that's just really, really fabulous content. So thank you very much. For those of you attending, thank you for being here. We hope you've appreciated this session. If you have any questions or concerns, let us know, and we hope we'll catch you at another session of AAC in the Cloud. Thanks again, and have a great day.